this summer, well, and every year for 10 years, AIF has given out awards for legislative leaders that on specific issues go above and beyond the call of duty in leadership. And I think we gave out about 20 or 24 awards. The governor was there to receive his. I think you were busy doing some work or family vacation. We wanted to impose, just for a second, Senator Simpson, as you know, along with Representative Caldwell in the House, was the leader in spearheading a terrific effort to get Everglades legislation passed on behalf of all Floridians and all interests. So we wanted to just take a minute while we have you here to, from AIF and the business community and Floridians in general, say thank you for your leadership on that issue.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, man.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Several things I should say before I get started. The most important one is I hate following the commissioner. And this is twice today I've had to follow the commissioner. That's a loss already. And what I was asked to speak to today was the Everglades legislation that we had passed last year. And last year was my first year in the Senate, and when the commissioner mentioned Trilby, and I don't realize how he remembers everything that he does, but I'm actually from Trilby, very small community in East Pasco County. So working on the Everglades legislation was really an honor. Last year, I think everyone knows this, but how that bill came together. The governor and the federal agencies got together, and the governor negotiated that Florida could take care of its own water resources in the Everglades, and they negotiated and said, okay, it's up to the Florida legislature to put a program in place that would give final water quality to the Everglades. The 2013 Act ensures that the Florida statutes conform with this new restoration plan. The commissioner mentioned that we have all of these plans out there and we never finished one. He said 1984 when he was in fourth grade, I think he said, fourth grade. I graduated high school in 1984. And then we always say things like, well, you know, this is for our children and our grandchildren. And until about 6 weeks ago, I would just say my children. And I found out about 3 days ago that my daughter, I'm going to be a granddad in about 8 months. The due date is May the 10th. So of course we looked at the charts, and I think it's about May the 3rd or 4th we're out of session. So if I missed that last week, you know what happened. Anyway, the Everglades Act that we passed, and we worked very hard on this last year, made an appropriation of $880 million through, I think, 2024 to restore the Everglades. There obviously was a series of STAs, and a lot of science went into this project. I actually had a helicopter tour of those facilities, and it's just a beautiful facility. The way they're starting to restore the Everglades from the Kissimmee and south, it's actually overwhelming. Several things had to be recognized during this bill if it were going to be successful. And I knew the magnitude of the bill because it's the Everglades, right? The eighth wonder of the world and all those things that matter. A third of our people receive the drinking water and all the economy that brings to the area. And what was important about that, I'm in the egg business, so agricultural interests were very important. Environmental interests were very important. The reality is I think we can both exist, and we do have to both exist if we're going to thrive as an economy in the state of Florida. Farmers spend about $10 million a year complying with best management practices. It was very important that this bill recognized that that was an effort being put through from the ag community. In addition to that, they paid the EAA privilege tax. Also, very important part of the component because of the constitutional amendment that was passed, the polluters should have to pay for the cleanup, or at least a portion of their fair portion of that cleanup. We believe that the bill that we passed this year best manages those between the environmental communities and the agricultural communities, realizing that a vast majority of our vegetables on the East Coast are grown in this area in the wintertime. And so the importance of the food that is grown from that area to the country is just as significant as the water resources to about a third of our population. It was something that when we got in front of the first committee, I believe the first committee we presented this bill to was the Environmental Committee. And I read my script, which takes a couple of minutes, and Senator Latvala is on that committee, and he stops the committee. Now, Senator Latvala has been a champion of the environment. He's always concerned about water issues. He's been a big champion of the environment. And so he stops at the end. We were just fixing to take our first vote, and it was going to be unanimous. Everyone was in support. And Senator Latvala looks up and says, "Wait a second, are you telling me that the environmental folks are on board with this bill?" "Yes, sir, they're on board." "Well, I need to hear from these folks." So the Audubon Society came up and spoke, and the Everglades Foundation came up and spoke, and they were in favor of the bill. And then he invited me to participate with 3 other bills with him on, which I did not. And no, we had our hands full enough. But it was to the credit of the Southwest Florida Water Management District, to the credit of the governor's office, to the credit of the agricultural folks that were in that area, and it was a great negotiation, turned out very well. By us implementing this plan, it saved about $800 million. I think the EPA had projected $1.6 billion. Turns out that we think we can accomplish this for $880 million. And I believe that we are making, based on what I've heard, we are making great progress towards that restoration. There are a couple of other pieces to the puzzle that we need to fill in, and this is not a state issue, but somewhat of a federal issue. The Caloosahatchee and the St. Lucie need to have their reservoirs built and restored so that water can be stored. Possibly that water can be stored and then even sent south. It does not have to be sent east and west. I think that is very important, and we need to work with our federal delegation to make sure that we see that through also. This coming year, I was asked to maybe throw out a few ideas of what we may be looking at this year. Obviously, water is, the commissioner said it very well, and I've said it 100 times and thought I was listening to myself for a second. We have 3 legs of our economy primarily now: tourism, agriculture, and construction and development. None of those 3 can exist without water. We are hoping to add a 4th leg to that stool, and of course that'll be manufacturing. It can't survive without water either. Water is the number 1 issue that this state is going to face. If you go back to '06 and look forward, there was a study done that said that by the year 2014 or 15, we would be out of freshwater resources, or there would be doing significant harm to our environment. The Great Recession, of course, took care of those problems because we had absolutely no growth for 4 or 5 years. But we are growing again at 1,000 people a day approximately right now. Water is going to be the number 1 issue, and of that committee that met a few weeks ago to make water in the top 5, it is actually number 1. We are going to have some legislation this year that's going to affect those areas, and I had a big note on one of my pieces of paper here that says, "Do not give out too much information." and Rachel's here in the front row, and she's glaring at me, so that's just the way it is. One of the bills we're going to do, which is more of a supply effort, in my area, District 18, Pasco Hernando County, we have several utilities that have operated in that area, private utilities that deliver inadequate water to the consumer and charge about twice as much as the local governments charge for straight across the road. We're going to look at a bill this year that probably affects those folks, that makes that come into line. I think that's very important, that we have consumers. You know, I'm from the private industry, and I love, private industry doing things instead of government. But we cannot support agencies' incompetence, as I will say. A very strong word, but I think it's true. You cannot have a consumer on one side of the road paying $120 a month for water, and one on the other side of the road paying $50 for the same water, except the water on their side of the road is a lot better quality. That's a bill that we're probably going to be looking at. One of the things the commissioner said about all the resources that we're going to do for water this year, how are we going to utilize these water resources? I believe we're going to have to start using all of our reclaimed water. Right now, today, we're putting 600, 700, 800 million gallons a day into either the Gulf or the ocean, and we are going to have to come up with a plan to utilize that water. I've got some ideas on that, and y'all will be seeing probably some of those in the next 60 days or so. In addition to that reclaimed water, we're looking at our spring restoration. For far too long, the Great Recession came, we had no resources. And we're going to have resources this year. We had resources last year that we deployed in these areas. And I'm looking forward to supporting some legislation, and there's lots of movement in the Senate on this, to help restore our springs. And so I think those are the areas that we're going to focus on this year concerning water. And I think it's going to be a very lively debate and discussion. And funding sources is going to be a very, very fun and lively discussion.